Joe said, on behalf of Vermont Fish and Wildlife, we are really excited to see what Joe, Bob, and the other representatives from TU have done to grow this program. I think one of the earlier slides showed in 2012 it was less than 10. This program really filled a hole left by when the feds pulled out of the Adopt a Salmon program. We had a few, like Mike, who was working with us doing trout specifically, and then I think a lot of the other schools have come in from that void left by Adopt a Salmon. So we thank Joe and everybody else who's worked hard to get it up to almost 100 schools, and we're looking forward to the Centennial Break here. It looks like maybe this year or even possibly next year, breaking 100 plus schools. So we're fully supportive of this program. We really do believe in it as an educational program, as far as some between this, our Let's Go Fishing instructors, our Let's Go Fishing programs, and other educational stuff that we have as well. So we're excited to work in this. What I want to show you today is kind of what goes on behind the scenes from now until you get your eggs in January. Kind of give you an idea of what we do in the hatchery process. To kind of give you information about that, these eggs that you will be receiving that week of July or January 7th that Joe was talking about, those eggs were actually spawned at our Salisbury facility this last Wednesday. So they have actually come out of the fish, they've been fertilized, they're in incubation now. So to start that process, it actually goes back a few years. Those fish that we took eggs out of now were 2 years old. So we go back 2 years to plan our broodstock numbers at our broodstock facility to figure out our egg requirements for this program. A lot of our other programs throughout the state are put and take programs for stocking state waters and things like that. So the eggs that we took again on Salisbury this last week were 2 years old, and I'll kind of give you a rundown on how we do that. This is a picture of our facility that I'm at right now, Roxbury Fish Hatchery, which is actually just at the bottom of the hill, about 15 miles north of Randolph on Route 12A, just on the other side of the mountain from Warren. Quick note, we're just currently in an offline situation right now. We're still rebuilding from Irene. We actually just started breaking ground and started construction this year, and hopefully we'll be back online. Probably not next winter, but the following spring. So we've worked hard to make this program still work. Our Salisbury facility has taken eggs from their brood line over there. We've worked with our partners with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service down at Pittsburgh. Our Eisenhower facility has graciously agreed to take these eggs, incubate them under the cold water that they have available from their Brook water to make eggs available to still make this program work while we go through this reconstruction phase. So I know they're not here right now, but thanks to the feds for helping us out. They've been a real big help since we've been offline in making our program needs. One of the first things we do is about the first part of October, we take and we go through the raceway of brook trout, the adults that we have set aside for our spawning pairs. We have probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 spawning pairs, so probably about 200 females, 200 males. And we sort them out. We sort them out between male brook trout, female brook trout, and separate them into raceways. This is a male brook trout here. I'll explain the characteristics and the differences here. Joe's got a nice slide that we put together here in a minute that shows the two of them together. But then this is a female as well. And what's really cool about this photo here is right here you can see the vent coming out. That's actually where the eggs come out. That's a really good indicator that that fish is actually really ripe and ready to spawn. You see that vent drop like that, that fish is ripe and ready. Telling the differences between a male and brook trout, female brook trout. Earlier in the season, the males aren't as colorful as this male is right here. They're starting to develop a little bit of that orange. So we're actually looking at body characteristics of the male and female. You'll see this guy's starting to get a little bit of a hook jaw. The males tend to have more of a triangular head. If you look down on them, they come to a point. They stay skinny and really compressed. You can actually see two lines that are going right down their underneath, which are right under here. The females, they tend to stay more grayish. The top of the heads are more oval. As they develop their eggs, they actually get more pregnant looking because they're full of eggs. So that's how we go through. We really just look at kind of the head type and try to use the body color as much as we can as we sort these fish out. When spawning occurs, it's usually with the brook trout, it's late October. Like I said, we just, this last Wednesday was our second fall take. We'll have one more this coming week, and then that's it to meet our program requirements for the fall brook trout. They spawn between late October, early November. What triggers spawning is decrease in water temperature. So as the water's getting colder, the brook trout are getting ready to spawn. Their egg development's actually increasing. The decreasing in day length, they see the day lengths, it's just indicators that, hey, it's time to spawn and do this. Generally, if you can pick the nastiest day outside that you can find, whether it's 32 degrees and the wind's blowing, that's usually when most of your fish are going to be ready, so it's tons of fun to do this time of year. Wind's blowing, snow's usually blowing. It's usually a day like this. So that's kind of the two indicators that we use, you know, as we start looking towards spawning season. We also do something at our Salisbury facility, which is called photoperiod manipulation. And basically what that is we call it a lighthouse over at that facility. We have two big raceways. They're completely enclosed. There's no windows. And what happens is we actually take, in starting back in usually May of this, so May of the season, so this coming May we'll start turning the lights back on these fish. What we do is we fool that brook trout into thinking that it's getting close to spawning season. So we actually take eggs from those fish in June to July. And what that does is that we get those out to other facilities within our program. It actually gets us you know, a few extra months of growth. It also helps us save on energy costs. We don't have to heat water to get fish up on feed. We can get our fish in. We can get, actually, it takes us a year and a half to go to an 8-inch fish. So if we have a couple extra months on the summer end, we can get them up on feed early in the fall, get them feeding before our waters start to cool down in our hatcheries, and actually get a head start on growth. So the lights in the building, they're on a timer. They decrease weekly, and then the fish induce spawning. We basically do the same thing. We'll go in there, we'll check those when the lights are on to see, you know, how close we are getting to spawning. The water temperature doesn't necessarily decrease. The light is more the larger factor there. We don't really have a way to lower it. So lower water temperature on that volume of water. So it's really more the decreasing in day length that really triggers it more than the water temperature. Once spawning starts, we go through and check the fish weekly for ripeness. So we'll go through just all the females, we'll crowd them up, and we'll look through like that vent that I showed you on that other female. We'll look for signs like that. A lot of them, if they're really ready, you almost pick the fish up and the eggs almost start falling out of the fish immediately. So we'll go through, we'll get a count, get an estimate on, okay, how many do we have ready for this week? And then the following day we'll set up and go through. Once fish are ripe, they're spawned for usually about a 3-week period is generally what we need in this time of year to meet our fall requirements. You know, week 1, week 2, you know, we have a dedicated program for each week. Week 2 is dedicated for TIC and our other co-ops that we work with. And then, like next week, we work with some private. So the fish we take this coming week will go to our private facilities. There's about 5 of them in the state of Vermont. There's actually a guy right down the road in Warwick that we work with quite a bit too. So we provide eggs to them as well. The females that are spawned each week, after that they're considered spent. We take them out of the pool that they're in, so they aren't getting checked anymore. We don't, you know, we put them off to the side. The average eggs per female is about 800 to 1,200 per pound, so that's what we call fecundancy. And we basically really look at those numbers, and each year we're taking, okay, we spawned this many fish this year, we got this many eggs, do the math, and we come up with our fecundancy, and that actually helps us estimate what our needs are for the next year on how many spawning pairs we need. We need a minimum of 250 spawning pairs. We worked with some geneticists, Bill Ardren with U.S. Fish and Wildlife out of Essex, to look at our facility and say, what's the minimum amount of spawning pairs we need to maintain genetic diversity? He's come back and said, you know, 250 is the minimum we need to maintain genetics within all our different brood lines at this facility. We tend to need more than that brook trout. What we need for production-wise, we have about 400 right now. So, you know, we're also looking at maintaining genetic diversity when we're doing this. And sometimes, I think some of the lines we are taking way more than what we need just to maintain genetics. So we don't necessarily need 250 pair to meet productions of other species, but for genetics we need to. So when we're spawning, we're also kind of keeping that in mind as well. On spawning day, the fish are placed in a tub with anesthetic. MS-222 is what we call it. This actually relaxes the fish and allows for easier handling. It makes it so the fish isn't flopping around, falling out of our hands, getting dropped on the ground, damaging it in any way. We try to be as gentle to the fish as possible while we're doing this whole process. So we put them in a tub very similar to this. This is over actually at Salisbury, and that's their lighthouse in the background. A lot of these photos were taken there. The females are then spawned into a bowl or strainer first. The strainer kind of allows all the ovarian fluids to drip off, and then they're placed into a bowl after that. The males are spawned into a separate cup. We don't want to put the eggs and the milk together right away because we don't want to start fertilization right away. We'll actually, before this step, we'll put them in a bowl and we'll do a couple things. So we'll put the eggs in a bowl, we'll add the milk, and we'll actually do what we call a dry spawn first. And in that dry spawn, we're actually just adding the milk and the egg together and kind of mixing it together, and we're letting it sit for a few minutes, kind of get everything together. We'll then add water, and we call that a wet spawn. And at that wet spawn, that water actually activates the milk at that point, and then the eggs will really start to get fertilized at that moment. So we kind of like to get everything, you know, mixed in well. It helps achieve higher fertilization rates on our eggs. After that's done, we'll let them sit for a few minutes in that water, and then what we're doing here, we just take some fresh water and we'll rinse the eggs. We want to clean out the water, we want to remove the milk, we want to get everything nice and clean again. So we'll go through and we'll rinse these eggs in these little tubs like this and just kind of keep rinsing water out until it's coming out clean and get everything cleaned up. From there, we let the eggs water harden. And basically what that is they're starting to suck up a lot of water, they're starting to expand, they're starting to grow. We also disinfect them for disease and bacteria at that point. So we let them sit in an iodine base that's similar to what farmers use, you know, to disinfect cows before they milk them. It disinfects the egg surface, but it is also actually sucking up some of that iodine inside the egg. And it's actually disinfecting the inside of the egg as well, which is really wild if you stop and think about it. Then the iodine actually will break back down after a while, and it has no harm to the eggs. It doesn't affect fertilization rates or anything. So this is our next step. We'll do a 30-minute water harden and iodine disinfection to any bacteria that were on there, any potential diseases that can be wiped out by iodine are taken care of at that point. So we'll do that. We also do that again at shipping. After water hardening, eggs are moved to our inside incubators. We just lay them down into the trays, similar to like what we're doing right now in this photo, and that's when the incubation point starts. This is where the eggs are at right now for your program. They're in an incubator down in Eisenhower, sitting in a very similar tray on cold water, just slowly incubating. How we count the eggs, everybody always asks, well, how do you know how many eggs you have? Like I said, you know, we go through and we use egg numbers from the year before to estimate, you know, what the fecundancy of the females are, kind of get an estimate of how many eggs we're going to get. How we do it specifically each year in the hatchery, there's a couple of ways to do it. Each facility is a little bit different. Some facilities use displacement. I like to use Von Baer. I think it's a little closer, a little more accurate than displacement. But basically, we use a 12-inch trough. It's a V-shaped metal trough. We lay the eggs out in a single line, and you count them out from one end to the other. Brook trout are usually 74 to 77 eggs per 12 inches. I then have a chart that I take, and it gives me the numeration. And basically, that 74 to 77 number, there's about 15,000 to 17,000 eggs per quart. We'll lay those eggs down per quart, per tray, like you saw in that last slide. After that, egg development after fertilization, like I was saying, those eggs were taken this last week. One of the biggest factors affecting egg development is water temperature at this point. We can literally control the rate of development now based on water temperature. So we have math that we use in DIs that Joe will talk to you more in depth later on, but we're using those right now to say, okay, at this water temperature, this is going to be 8% development per day. And I think I'd talk about this a little bit longer, but a little bit further in the slideshow. With the ability to control water temperature, we can accurately predict and control egg development to within a specific couple days. The warmer the water is, the faster development occurs, and also the colder the water, the slower it is. So we'll use those factors to go through that based on our program needs. Development index, we track the eggs development from fertilization to first feeding based on this percentage. 50 degrees is usually a 1.2% development, or about 48 days to hatch. So we had weak eye at 29%, strong eye at 47%. Our goal generally for this program has been, we've been shooting about 44% for DI when they come to you as eggs after the first of the year. So basically I use that 44%. We look at yesterday's, or the spawn date, how many days I have left. We do some math and we get the water temperature that Eisenhower needs to look at and hit their target goal to hit that 44. So we're doing something new this year. The department, and one of the things that we've decided to do this fall is we're going to more triploid brook trout. As a matter of fact, all our brook trout at this point are going to be called our triploid trout. All your eggs that are coming in are going to be triploids. It's a conservation thing that we have been using with the state for a few years now. As we've gotten more successful with it, we've been expanding it out more. And basically one of the reasons we use it is it's a management tool where we're putting fish in areas where there might be genetically native brook trout species already there. We don't want these roam brook trout to spawn on top of those and ruin the genetics. We're using these fish mostly as a put and take when we're putting them out in a large number, so we don't want them really to genetically interfere with that. This year will be the first year, this first egg take this year was the first year that all our brook trout were triploided. So what are triploids and how do we create them? Triploids in simple terms is a triploid fish that is sterile. These fish have 3 sets of chromosomes, unlike fertile fish that have 2. Triploids are common in many industries. Seedless watermelons are triploids and bananas are triploids as well. So it's making a sterile fish. Basically what we do is when we fertilize these eggs, you'll have an egg with 2 N haploid chromosomes, and then you get a third one from the melt coming in. And what we'll do is, based on water temperature, again, everything's based on water temperature, we're doing a treatment at this moment to make it a 3N, and I've got a different slide here in a minute to get into this a little bit more. This would be a 3N, 3 chromosome triploid versus a 2. What we do is, to get to that moment, we fertilize the eggs and they'll sit in a container for a period of time called a time temperature unit. This allows the egg sufficient enough time to develop the polar body and expel it. But what we're looking to do is we use a formula called 300 time temperature divided by temperature in Celsius. Generally our water temperatures are about 8 degrees Celsius. If you do the math on that, we're looking at about a 38 minute mark. So what we're going to do is we're going to fertilize these eggs. We let them sit in that bowl that I showed you earlier. And as we approach 33 minutes, that picture that I showed you a few minutes ago, we put them in a chamber like this, and as they approach 33 minutes, we're actually putting the eggs in this chamber with water. We're pushing this up to a 10,000 psi in the water. And what that's doing is it's not allowing that third polar body to escape. It actually, the hole in the egg closes. That third polar body stays in there, and then that egg creates 3 chromosomes, and it doesn't distinguish whether it's a male or female. It's just a sterile fish, and it doesn't distinguish between male or female. That's pretty much all there is to it. I mean, after that, what are you going to do? It's really wild stuff. I mean,
start naming their fish. I visited several fish where the fish was deformed and they called it a frankenfish. Yeah, all of our fish are frankenfish.
Yeah. So it's not we aren't doing anything really genetically. The fish is still genetically the same. We haven't changed any genetic traits of the fish. It's just basically making it so it can neither develop male or female characteristics, which makes it a sterile fish for us to use in our management programs. Like Joe said earlier, brook trout is our only native species. We do a lot to conserve that species and try to do everything we can not to interfere with the genetics on some of the strains and specific areas we have out. Other methods we use, we just simply don't stock if we think it's a high risk. Bat and kill is a prime example where we haven't stocked that river in a long time. The Dog River's another one. So it's just another management tool that we've been using for a while.
I just think it's important for the non-fishermen to understand some of our terms. Like some of the people in here probably don't understand what put and take is.
Yeah, so basically, like we were saying, put and take is basically we're stocking fish for people, anglers, to actually go take and fish and angle and keep them. Where, you know, the other side of that is we have restoration programs where we're looking to restore fish populations. Lake Champlain's a primary one where we put in salmon, steelhead, lake trout. Those fish actually kind of the big distinguishing feature between those two programs. If we're doing a restoration program, generally those fish don't tend to go in as catchables that are legal to keep as far as size and what the law book would say. Whereas we take our brook trout, our rainbow trout, and our brown trout are all of catchable size. Our brook trout minimum length requirement is 8 inches to go to for our stocking goal. Our rainbow goal for growth is 10 inches, as well as our brown trout. So that's kind of the difference between put and take and restoration as far as what we're doing for program goals. And you know, using triploid trout just helps us with our put and take and creating angling opportunities in places where, you know, we seem like it should be, you know, a good place for it. Urban areas, different streams all over the state, different ponds. A lot of ponds in the areas were created by the CCC a long time ago. Macintosh Pond around here, so we create fishing opportunities in those areas as well. I think that was pretty much it that I had together for Joe. So if anybody has any questions.
Where are we going to pick up the eggs in January?
What's that?
Where are we going to be picking up the eggs in January?
Currently they're in Pittsburgh, so that's the current plan.
Okay.
So unless...
Could change?
Good, we'll see. We'll see. Figure it out, but right now that's where they're at, and we'll see how it goes. I've talked to Bob about it a little bit, but we'll see how we can do to make it easy for you, because I know you're coming up from what, Cambridge area or something?
That's right, and I go from Waterbury down and then back up north.
Right, so we'll...
3 o'clock in the morning, here you come.
Yeah, well, we can talk, and I've talked with Bob, I have some ideas on that, I just don't know if I'll be able to pull it off yet.
Okay,
we'll see.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if the fish are sexless, what characteristics do they have visually? I mean, like if I were to catch one,
they don't really develop any of those characteristics. They kind of just look like a female. They don't develop that hook. They don't really develop that color. They just, what really happens with, the really interesting part that really happens with these fish that we've found, because we do hold a few of them for our trophy trout program, which is our 2-year-olds that we put out. When they hit that 2-year-old sexual maturity part, and they're actually supposed to be developing gametes, they actually put all that energy into growth, and we actually see a huge increase in growth in that time frame. So that energy that isn't going into gamete production is still there, but it actually ends up going into growth.
are you doing this with browns and rainbows as well?
No, like Joe referred to earlier, we do browns. We don't do any of it. We do have some triploid rainbows. Browns were brought in from Germany back in the 1800s as eggs. Rainbows came from the West Coast. We tend to look to conserve the rainbows a little bit more. The brown trout stockings that we do, we don't really do a ton of them to begin with, so we aren't doing them on really any of the other species. A little bit with rainbows, but nothing with brown trout.
So the triploids, do they exhibit spawning behavior in the spawn?
They do, actually. They'll try.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that we've also noticed is, you know, we're also trying to figure out how to not interfere with a wild trout trying to spawn with a triploid trout, because they will try to do that.
Yeah, so I was wondering.
But again, you know, a lot of the studies that the biologists have put together is that the put and take that we're doing, all those fish, most of those are 95 to 98% of those fish are actually caught out before they hit that next fall. So a lot of the spring fish we're putting in, they're going out and doing the stream surveys in the fall. They aren't finding them anymore, so we're assuming that most of those are angled out by that point anyway. So
And this isn't really a CIC question, but how come you don't stock more brown trout in Vermont?
to be honest with you, I grow fish, and it's a fisheries management decision. I don't know why, you know, brown trout isn't such a huge. I know on the hatchery end, the water requirements, we have a lot of cold water to grow, which is great for growing brook trout and rainbows. we have a hard time within the hatchery system with browns because they just need a little bit warmer water. Making size requirement and the temperatures that we have internally in our hatchery system, we've struggled with it. You know, that's really all I can speak to on the hatchery end, but as far as fisheries management, why they don't go with more browns in the lower stretches and things like that, I'm not really sure what their management philosophy is on that.
I just want to say one thing. The teachers should get Jeremy's email address, and if you have questions which the students are always asking that you can't answer, or maybe your coordinator can answer, blast it to Jeremy.
Yeah, it's on the sheet that Joe
Glad
handed out
to
the
get back
tax
to
list. So.
Keep it in mind.
Yep, so we have it on there somewhere in that sheet. So.
Thank you, Jeremy.